And we're joined by the Opposition's climate change spokesman, Greg Hunt. Welcome.
It's a pleasure.
If we could go to your direct action plan. Now, the biggest carbon-emitting power stations in Australia are the brown coal-fired plants in Victoria.
Correct.
What would your plan do about those?
Well, we actually have a plan which could potentially deal with some of those power stations which only last week said they would continue producing in just the same way under the government's carbon tax until way into the 2030s. Our approach would be potentially to provide them with incentives, such as the Yallourn power station, to help it transition from coal to gas to save 10 million tonnes a year. Under the government's carbon tax, electricity prices will skyrocket, but they'll be passed through to the consumer. No change there. A classic example of the difference between practical action under the direct action approach, which will clean up potentially a power station, a waste coal mine gas issue or a landfill gas issue, and simply higher power costs under the government.
Sure, but you agree that brown coal-fired power stations are much cheaper than gas stations, aren't they?
Well, they are.
And
we
so
also
who pays
have
the price difference?
We also have a mechanism built in to ensure that there are no price differences, no impact on electricity prices as a result.
Well, how do you move from $30 a tonne to $45 a tonne, which is the cost of gas?
What we would do is help in the transition process from coal to gas by providing an incentive, but it's only if this is the lowest cost way of reducing emissions.
But sorry,
There's no approach under the
government
government system which would allow that, but electricity prices would skyrocket. No change in electricity prices under us.
How could there be no change in electricity prices when the source of power is going up so much? Would you be paying the difference? Would that be taxpayers' money?
We have consciously built into the model that we've got the fact that we would ensure that unless costs remain the same, we would find other means of reducing emissions. But we have spoken with the companies in question, such as the CEO of True Energy, which owns the Yallourn power station, and we can make that transition. The government cannot. It's a practical example.
And True Energy said that this can't be viable unless electricity prices go up 20%. That's what you're proposing, isn't it? A rise in the cost of electricity, either paid for by the consumers or paid for by government, which is taxpayers' money. So which is it? Where is the cost picked up?
Sure. There will be no increase in electricity prices to consumers under us.
Who pays?
There will be under the carbon tax, and we'll provide incentives to reduce emissions and ensure that electricity prices do not change. And we have said right from the 2nd of February last year that we would include any differential on the cost of electricity for the station within our approach. We've been very upfront on that.
Budgeted? So that's in your $1 billion a year. You could cover that sort of cost, $2.5 billion to build, a 20% increase in electricity prices. You could cover that in the $1 billion a year that you're setting aside. Is that what you're saying?
We have said that we would include all costs within our budget. Let me give you an example. In the first year of our system, it would be $300 million to reduce emissions as opposed to $10 billion under what the government's proposing, because they're going to increase electricity, petrol, gas and groceries, not to mention the price of Australian-made cars, not to mention the price of houses.
Where do you get the money from, and for how long will you be paying a subsidy to power stations?
Sure. We will, over 4 years, for example, spend $3.2 billion on our approach. That's offset by $50 billion of savings. So we make the savings, and from within our savings, we fund our policy. That's how the Murray-Darling Basin policy was funded. That's how practical direct action will be funded.
So your expectation is you will make $50 billion worth of savings. Where will those savings be found?
Well, this was set out by Joe Hockey last year prior to the election. Let me give you a significant example. Within the public service freeze, over the 4-year period, $3.8 billion. The offsetting cost for not having interest for the NBN, $2.4 billion. Those are two examples of the overall cost savings we'd make, and they are good examples of the difference between the two sides of politics.
You're saying that you are now spending the savings that Joe Hockey has put aside, because, of course, the big thing that the coalition wants to do is get out of debt and deficit, but you've got a plan for that money, a plan that's not budgeted for, because somebody has to pay the cost differences that you're talking about.
With respect, you're incorrect.
So, where does the money come from? Or you're spending the money that Joe Hockey's saving?
No. We are making savings of $50 billion. Within that was any new coalition expenditure proposals, which includes the $3.2 billion for this, and on top of that, there was an $11 billion addition to the surplus.
And $3.2 billion you're saying now will cover the cost of that increased gas price for how long?
We were looking at a period out to 2020.
What happens after
and then
that?
In 2020, we'll make sure that we have reviewed the system to have long-term certainty for industry. I do have to say that the ALP's policy, which was announced in this studio on August the 12th by Wayne Swan of there will be no carbon tax, I rule out a carbon tax. He also said that in this studio, barely lasted a couple of weeks. We're designing a policy for the next decade, and that gives certainty, and it will have a review mechanism.
But doesn't it appear from this that your policy is massively underfunded, and Malcolm Turnbull says that it will cost $18 billion a year by 2050. Do you agree with those figures?
I will focus on the next 10 years. That's my job. I'm certainly not going to
But this doesn't end in 10 years, does it?
I am designing a policy. We have set out a policy for 10 years. The ALP went to the election with cash for clunkers, citizens' assembly, no carbon tax. Their policies couldn't last a matter of weeks. We've got a decade with a review mechanism in 2015. And for the people at home, what's the difference between $412 in the increase in the price of a car, but only if it's Australian made, $6,000 for increase
just to clarify for the people at home, you are arguing that you can force a move to higher cost sources of electricity and it will come at no cost to consumers, and you're prepared to pay the difference forever.
We will only deal with the lowest cost emissions reductions. And if we can clean up some of our oldest and dirtiest power stations as one of the lowest cost means of reducing emissions, we're happy to do that. But it could be soil carbon, it could be capturing waste coal mine gas, it could be cleaning up landfills. Whatever's lowest cost, we'll do that. But the government, I have to say, can't tell us whether petrol is in or out. Today it appears to be back in, and cars are going up, houses are going up, electricity's going up, and above all else, the cost of living is increasing by $863.
Greg Hunt, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.